if you're an unbeliever, you should. Here's some things you should expect. You should expect to be welcomed, right? You should expect to be loved. You should expect to be that people will come up and talk to you and engage with you and ask you how you're doing. And you should expect to be invited to family homes for dinners and things like that. And you should expect all of that. But you should also expect to be told that you're a sinner who needs to repent from your sins and come to Christ. And that until that takes place, you actually don't belong.
All right, welcome to the WatchWell Podcast. My name is Parker, and this is my co-host, Nik. Nik, we are going to be navigating the question, does Home Alone teach us something about the Bible?
Or can it?
Or can it? Can
it teach us something about the Bible?
So, we'll ponder that a little bit later. How was your week?
Great week. Today I'm dragging a little bit. So I got my coffee right here with me.
What are you drinking? What kind of coffee?
It's just coffee. Just regular coffee. Yeah, I've got a little bit of creamer in it.
Yeah, we gotta get some Black Rifle over there for you.
Yeah. Sponsorship, maybe?
Yeah,
no,
maybe. Yeah. Check us out, Black Rifle.
Yeah. So yeah, dragging a little bit. Overall, doing good. Ready to answer that question. Ready to talk about that. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Church was busy today, 2 services, and we had a meeting afterwards. So very similar morning. I'm actually feeling pretty good today, though.
You there?
Got a lot of stuff to do.
Were you at both services?
Yeah, we went to both services.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just really good. Yeah, I'm ready for the podcast. I got some work I got to do later, so do the fun part now with the podcast, and then do the work later. It's kind of that's the motto, right?
Yeah.
So, Home Alone, did you like it? Are you brave enough to say you didn't?
Oh no, not at all. This is one of those movies for me. It's like the ultimate nostalgia.
Yeah.
Like moment, because I was 3 years old when it came out, and I couldn't even count how many times I've seen this movie throughout my life. So,
right.
Yeah, I love it. One other thing.
Okay.
So you and I talked,
yeah.
and we're planning on doing Die Hard in this series of Christmas movies, right?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. So I think Home Alone is the key to solving and resolving the debate of whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Okay.
You want to know why?
That's a bold statement. I really do.
Very, very, it's a very simple thing, and it's probably really stupid, but I want to say it anyway.
Go for it.
Home Alone is a copy of Die Hard, and Home Alone is a Christmas movie.
Oh, interesting. So, we should have all of the people listening jump in on the comments on their opinions on whether or not Die Hard is similar to Home Alone and how it is similar, and then what makes one a Christmas movie over the other.
Right.
We should start that discussion. I think that's pretty fun.
Unless you just want to say that the thing that makes Home Alone a Christmas movie is the Christmas music.
Yeah, or that it just happens around Christmas.
Right, but Die Hard.
Well, there's Christmas music in Die Hard as well. So
there you go. Yeah. If Home Alone's a Christmas movie, Die Hard is too.
I agree. I tend to agree.
So there we go.
So before we get started, I do have a question for you, Nik. In the sense of doing Home Alone and reviewing Home Alone through the lens of truth, we do have to ask ourselves the question: have you ever been left home alone when you were a kid?
You mean like forgotten?
Just
like
forgotten, just completely forgotten. Yeah.
No.
You weren't? I don't think at least to my knowledge. Now, if my parents end up listening to this, we're going to have some conversations on if you ever did, because I'd like to know. But I don't know. At least they've never told me, which if I left Ronan, my son, at home, I don't know if I'd ever tell him either. So, had to ask. I don't know if you ever were. Have you ever left your kids at home alone?
No.
Just completely forgot. Maybe think Katie had them and just left.
Nope. Never? Nothing like that.
I guess that makes us good parents. Yeah. If our parents have, I guess that makes us good parents.
I hope so.
Yeah.
We did, we were foster parents for a while, and
Okay.
we didn't leave anyone, we didn't forget anybody. We
You
didn't
can't.
nothing like that.
Well, that one's a little
Um,
bit harder to forget
yeah, we didn't forget anybody, but
if harder is a thing.
we were walking in a parade. It was I don't even know what the parade was for. It was over the summer. And it was like a town parade, and we were throwing candy, and one of our foster daughters was near us walking throwing candy, and we turned around and she wasn't there anymore.
Uh-oh.
And so what happened was she was throwing candy, but then she saw the candy on the ground and started to pick it up. And she
Ah.
stopped and got behind the rest of the
Yeah.
parade. And
Uh-huh.
so we're frantically looking like we just became foster parents. What are we going to do about this? Like we're going to lose our foster license. We're not going to be able to do any. And so like, panicking in that moment, but she was standing next to a police officer and just waiting. So, it worked out, but that was kind of a panic moment. But no, we've never like forgotten anybody or left anyone at home or anything like that.
Yeah. Cool. So let's get into some of the ratings. I'm interested to see
Okay.
some of these ratings. Let's see if we agree with them. Let me pull it up here. Make sure that we have the right one. We've
Okay.
had some technical difficulties this morning, so we're a little out of whack here. But okay. Common Sense Media.
Yeah.
Age 10 and up. What do you think, Nick? What's your
Uh,
initial thoughts?
I mean, I think that's probably playing it a little too safe.
A little too
That's
safe?
putting it really high. Yeah.
I
So I
tend to
think
agree. Yeah.
yeah, and then we have the parents and kids recommendation too. And what is that? 8 and 9.
Yep, you got it. Parents say
Yeah.
9 plus, kids say 8 plus. Um, it's interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more about how the kids, how they ask, like how Common Sense Media asks the kids and how that plays out, because um are kids just going off of what their parents allow them to do? So like how, with the answering, how are kids going to rate a movie that they're not allowed to see? If they're saying 8 plus, then
Right.
how, I wonder how that works.
Yeah, and I don't know their method of
I don't
gathering
either.
that stuff. Unless
I'm
it's
not
just
sure.
members of the site somehow. Maybe they get surveys or something.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Um, so let's go ahead and do an overview, Nick, for us, and we'll get started.
Yeah, so I think, this movie is what? 30 This
It's
movie
old,
32 years old.
classic. It's
Yeah,
old.
this movie is 32 years old. Um, so if you haven't seen it, um, you
Go
know,
watch it.
go watch it. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it by now, so yeah, that's the premise is that Kevin McAllister wishes that he would wake up and his family would be gone, and in a way, he gets his wish that and we'll probably talk more about specific scenes, but just that's the overarching idea right there. That his family is there's conflict to start the movie between Kevin and his family. He's getting in trouble and all of that stuff. And he says, "I wish I didn't have a family at all. I wish you would all just disappear." And then they leave for a vacation, flying overseas to France, and they think that they have Kevin, but they don't have Kevin. They miscounted or they counted a neighbor boy that wasn't actually going with them. And then Kevin wakes up and his family has already left. So he thinks his wish made his family disappear. So that
Yeah,
is, and then we have Joe Pesci and I don't remember the other actor's name,
I
but
don't either.
the character's name is Marv, and they are robbers. They are there scouting out the neighborhood to um, to rob all of the houses that families are gone on vacation for Christmas. And Kevin is an 8-year-old boy left home alone in this situation.
Right.
Anything to add?
I don't. That's pretty good. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about the movie review.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I really am.
So that I mean, I don't know if we want to jump in already, but that brings us. I mean, people have already seen it, so I don't know that we really need to. I'm assuming people have seen it, so I don't
Right,
really
right,
think we
right.
need to do like a rundown of characters or anything like that, really.
No.
But what sticks out? What's most memorable? Like not even like talking about lessons yet, but what is most memorable about this movie for you?
I would say that the iconic, like him waking up and
Yeah,
just the
yeah,
iconic Macaulay Culkin with the screaming and just the very quotable iconic scenes is what sticks out
yeah,
to me. So
yeah.
that's what I would say. What about you?
For me, it's when so the robbers have finally made it into the house, and Kevin is running up to the attic, and then Marv dives over a string, grabs Kevin's leg as he's trying to get up the steps, and Kevin sees the tarantula, his brother's pet spider, picks it up and puts it on Marv's face. In the blood curdling scream that comes from Marv when that spider's on his face. That's probably the most memorable thing for me. It's like I don't know that there's ever been a more convincing scream in all of film history. Like it's just this blood curdling, terrified moment because the spider's on his face, and it's hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I'm on the wrong scene here, but okay, we're back. Good.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I think the spider scene's good. I like it when the iron falls down the laundry chute and
Yeah.
smacks him in the face. I
And
mean, when he's stepping on
nobody would survive even one of those things.
no, not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
Um, that's good stuff. It's a lot of fun. Let's see. So back to the question: does
Mhm.
Home Alone teach us something about the Bible?
Yeah. So I will say you can use it to teach something about the Bible. The movie on its own, watching it for entertainment, probably doesn't do that. But when you view it, when you've given over the way you see the world to Jesus, to Christ, and He is now the lens that you see things through. The Bible is your worldview. Then, of course, it can,
Right.
because we can look through that lens um and so one of the things, I'll just throw out there at first is um the movie has a big component is family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does the Bible have anything to say about family?
A lot to say about family.
Right. Another component is um um theft, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have robbers. Does the Bible have anything to say about theft?
Few things.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's all of these things that the movie's just throwing in there as entertainment, but that if we look at those through our lens, that it's going to direct us to Scripture. And the premise of the movie is that Kevin wants his family gone because he's getting in trouble all the time. And if we were to, I'm going to turn there now, turn to the book of Ephesians. I was in the wrong spot just a second ago, so excuse me while I turn. But we touched on this when we did the fences episode, but Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1: Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with the promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. How do you feel Kevin, as an 8-year-old boy, is doing with that instruction right there?
Um, Not well. I mean, that's the obvious answer is not well.
Yeah,
I think that he struggles. I think it's very relatable, at least the character arc, because, I mean, how many brothers does he have? And he's what, the
right.
youngest?
Yeah.
So I think that, or at least one of the youngest. So I think that it's very, very interesting to, or at least it's relatable to other people because, kids young kids of older brothers and older siblings where, even in the movie it seems like everybody's got their own thing going on and Kevin just doesn't understand where he fits. Where do I fit? I'm young, I'm too young to do certain things. I want to be my own person. I'm always getting in trouble. Um he needs to he needs to heed his
Yeah.
parents' advice and obey his parents, but the reasons why he doesn't, I think, are very relatable,
Yeah.
and very real.
And he's bitter because it seems like he's always getting in trouble because of other people.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially that big scene, that big moment at the beginning of the movie or near the beginning where Buzz eats all the cheese pizza on purpose,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then he, like, shoves it in his mouth and is um, like, showing off
Mhm.
to Kevin, "Hey, I just ate your pizza. What are you gonna do about it?" Right? And he's being provoked all the time. He's got
Right.
which is I mean, it's what older siblings do.
Mhm.
Did you I mean,
I absolutely did it.
you're the oldest.
Absolutely.
Did you do any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah?
Of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, even though it's what older siblings do, he's obviously bitter and angry about it, and that's causing more and more frustration to build, and it's like these outbursts are happening because of it.
Yeah.
And
And I
his
think that
disobedience, his
yeah.
disrespect to his mom, his disrespect to his dad even, it talks about he used his fishing lures um, to make Christmas ornaments or something like that. That's one of
Right.
those scenes. So yeah, I mean, it's just seems like it's all bitterness because he's constantly in trouble because of other people. Or at
So
least
let me so
he
yeah,
sees it that way.
let's he sees it that way, but is he wrong to see it that way? Let's start unpacking this, because I think we can use this if we definitely, use our presuppositions to view this through a certain lens and view it through our faith. We can look at this as a Kevin problem, an older sibling problem, and a parent problem.
Mhm.
Because, I guess I would ask you, is he wrong with everything that we know, understanding everything we know about Kevin and why he is feeling the way that he's feeling, leading to his disobedience? His disobedience isn't justified, but are his feelings justified? Is there an unjust is there something that is going against Kevin that is justified in his that he's justified in his feelings?
Well, I mean, I think you could look at that pizza scene again and just answer whose fault was it?
Because I would say it would be the older brother's fault.
Yeah, it's Buzz's fault.
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, Kevin does push him.
Kevin does push him, but from a parental perspective, coming in and seeing something like that, you know, you can't, as a parent, you can't just, you know, take one side or the other. You need to get to the bottom of what the issue is and then deliver justice as we're called as parents to deliver justice. Not even just
Mhm.
parents, just people in authority. So you really have to get to the bottom of things in truth, and it makes it difficult for parents. And I think a lot of parents are excited about vacations, or they've got other things going on at work, or relationship stuff between spouses, and it's just, I don't want to deal with that. You're the one being noisy, and it just happens that the noisy one is the youngest. You're the problem.
Right. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
bother me.
Right.
And I
And in
think that we should
reality,
look at that we should look at that, and we should really examine, as parents specifically, and even just any other authority, like I said before, we really need to, because if we start to degrade truth and what justice truly is from a biblical perspective by just pushing it off onto the one that's making the most noise because we don't want to deal with it, then our kids start to do that because they learn from us,
Mhm.
whether we like it or not. So go ahead and you can kind of jump on that a little bit. I want to hear your thoughts, because I think it's important to look at that from the whole spectrum of, or I guess wholesomely, so that we can do a good job examining that kind of analogy, I guess.
Yeah. So the way the movie sets it up, Kevin is it's more than understandable that Kevin would feel hated by
Yes.
everyone in the room, every member of his family, his parents, everybody. He's bullied by every one of his siblings. I mean, the way they set it up, I think I can't remember what the middle brother says something about him. The sister says you are what the French called "la incompetent," like you're incompetent. You can't do this on. You can't pack your own suitcase. And then straight up to Buzz eating the pizza, bullying him, and then to the uncle who stands up after all of it and says, "Look what you did, you little jerk." Right? Like, which is kind of ironic because who's actually the jerk?
Right, exactly.
The uncle is being the jerk, right?
Right.
Right? I mean, he's the one. He's the adult. He should be able to have self control, and handle that situation well. And um, and they don't. So I think
No.
Kevin is more than it's more than understandable that he would feel hated, that he would feel not valued at all, that he would feel like
Worthless.
worthless. Yeah,
Worthless.
and when people treat you that way, you're gonna be like, I wish you were gone, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna have that. It's like this big blow up, and a lot of parents probably watch Home Alone and say, "Man, Kevin is just so disrespectful. I can't believe he talks like that to his parents." But the movie also kind of paints the picture that his parents don't do anything to help him, to protect him, to discipline. Like they're just kind of there.
Yeah, or even to discipline and teach him why they're disciplining. It's just, you know, it's like, "Don't do that," whatever that is. Well,
Hmm.
explaining the why would be helpful as a parent to get your kid to understand, maybe it leads to some type of pain, whether it be physical, emotional, whatever. Maybe you want to teach your kid that decisions like that are could lead to bigger issues. I mean, I understand that, like, Exodus, what is it, 2012 that you just cited,
Hmm.
honor the father and mother, like, there is no exception. So yes, obedience at the end of the day, obedience is required. It's not an option, but I think that there's good and bad ways to go about it. So
And the parents aren't without responsibility in that too.
absolutely,
The
yeah,
parents are
100%.
not. So as a parent, you have a responsibility to be honorable,
Yeah, you do.
right?
Yep,
So it tells children to honor your father and your mother. Well, parent, make sure that you're making it as easy as possible for your child to honor you,
absolutely. Yep,
right?
that's good stuff,
You're
man.
being an
Hmm.
honorable person. I mean, but to go back to Ephesians, and again, this might be repetitive with our fences episode, but I mean, it is what it is. But
That was almost a year ago,
it was almost a year ago.
so
It's
I
crazy.
think it's worth bringing up again.
Yeah. So, you know, like it said here, honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you. Um, Sorry, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And then verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And that is absolutely missing in the McAllister household.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%.
So
You're
sure,
correct.
Kevin is disrespectful, and he doesn't honor his parents. He doesn't honor what they say. He comes around to it because he misses
Mhm.
them when they're gone. And but it's that aspect of things is completely absent. There's not there's not discipline, there's not teaching, there's not instruction, there's just, "You did something wrong, get out of my sight."
And when you remove all of that, why is it wrong? Like, why is what I'm doing wrong?
You
If
mean
there's
from
no
the kid's
from
perspective?
the kid's perspective,
Yeah.
yeah, from Kevin's perspective, if dad or mom or the union, or the spouse togetherness is teaching the children why something is wrong according to the Bible, then there's a standard by which it is wrong.
Mhm.
If you remove all of that, well, I'm no different than what's why shouldn't I annoy my brother and
Mhm.
cause why is Kevin's uh I guess wants in those situations when he's being loud, or his feelings or whatever, any less valued than mom's or dad's wanting to not be annoyed.
Mhm.
So I think that that's also really important to note, that it goes both ways. The
Yeah.
the intellectual argument goes both ways.
So you're a parent, I'm a parent. Um, we don't have the number of kids that the McAllisters do in Home Alone, but so let's say you put yourself in you're Kevin's dad,
Okay.
which makes you Buzz's dad. I don't know his other brother's name or his sister's name. Um, and this all happens. Like the pizza thing
Okay.
happens. Kevin pushes him, knocks over the milk. Your brother says, "Look what you did, you little jerk. You're the dad. It's your house. What do you do?"
Well, I would get them. Well, I think that's kind of a loaded question, to be honest. I'll give you
Mhm.
my answer, but I think that part of the problem. So I think we're seeing symptoms of a bigger issue because
Okay.
there is no biblical foundation to the kids growing up that that stuff is bubbling up to the
Mhm.
surface to a degree because kids are always going to be kids, right?
Yeah.
But to just at a surface level face value answer, I would go to them instead of yelling or screaming or just punishing the loudest, youngest kid, whatever it may be. I would deliver the punishment appropriate to the crimes is what I would try to assess the best I could in that situation, having not seen it. So I would go and I would demand honesty, and then I would deliver the punishments according to, okay, Kevin, you shoved your brother. That's not allowed in this house. You're going to get this punishment, whatever that punishment would be. Hey, older brother, you have a little bit bigger of a punishment because you're the older brother. You have a little bit more responsibility in the situation, and I want to help develop your maturity so that this doesn't happen again. You might get a little bit bigger of a punishment than younger brother because younger brother looks up to you. You have a higher degree of responsibility in those situations. You need to be a leader. These kinds of things. That would be kind of the surface level thought process and how I would deliver that. Because
Mhm.
then the consequences are not equal, but they are fair because each kid needs to learn the lessons that they need to learn, and they're not always equal. You need
Mhm.
to meet them where they are, and you need to essentially teach them that, hey, dad's delivering a punishment that is true and according to like true justice is really what it is. One person's just not going to get punished, and the other one's going to got off scotch free
Mhm.
because there are probably multiple wrongs happening, and we need to teach our kids and bring them up in the we need to practice what we preach, essentially is what I'm saying. We need
Yeah.
to punish the wrong things and praise the right things all the time as
Yeah.
parents so that we can train our kids to avoid the bad things and celebrate the good things so that they because all of that adds up to good decision making.
Mhm.
So I don't know, those are
Yeah.
some of my superficial thoughts without any more depth, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's I think it's really good to point out that there's an absence of any type of foundation, that there's an absence of, this event, this movie, the conflict in the family, isn't just, isolated to this moment,
Right,
right?
it's not.
There's things that have been bubbling up underneath the surface that are likely there. And if it were real, there would definitely be things bubbling up under the surface. And
Because what if
er,
Kevin's dad goes in to handle that situation and they don't respect him? Well, why? Do they
mhm,
understand that there's authority in being a father by the Bible?
right.
Like these are things that you teach your children about authority, that God gives authority, and we want to raise our kids to honor God, and if they're going to honor God, they're going to honor their parents. But then that also teaches young kids that parents need to be honorable. And if you
Hmm.
lose that foundation at a young age, then well, I don't. Then you know, anything is possible at that point because there's no grounding.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And one thing that kind of sticks out to me in the movie is, um, what is what is dad even doing?
yeah, does it mention his job?
No, it doesn't mention his job. He's obviously wealthy and successful. It doesn't say what he does, but I mean, I'm talking like every time something happens with the kids and there's a response necessary, who's the one leading the charge? Mom.
Right,
And that's not to say that moms shouldn't discipline their kids, but dad's basically absent in the whole thing. Like, who's the one desperately fighting to get back home because they realize their son's alone?
mom.
Mom. Who's
Right,
the one who's trying to discipline Kevin on her own? Mom. Like, what is Kevin's dad even doing? And it's his brother, the one that called his son a jerk. Like, are you in his house? What's he doing? What's he even doing?
Right. That's a
He's
very good point. That's a very good point.
and moms have authority too. I'm not saying she shouldn't be disciplining him,
Right.
but when things reach a certain point, that is the role of a father to step in, and when all of this chaos is happening, to bring order.
Right.
You have all of this going on. Milk is on the ground, pizza's been vomited up, a kid's just pushed another kid, and it's dad's job to step in and give and provide order in that, to take all of that and organize it. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to and in doing so, not don't bring hatred upon yourself, don't provoke to more anger, don't provoke to more chaos. When you bring order to that, it actually brings peace to the situation, and then you can resolve it. You can actually have a real resolution, and that's the job of a father to step in and do,
Mm-hmm.
especially if he's able. There are families that's not possible, and I understand that. Um, and that's why it's so difficult in those families a lot of the time. But that is the role of a dad to step in. And in this movie, I mean, maybe it's because he's gone all the time for work, because a lot of successful people are like
Yeah,
that,
maybe that it
and
is,
he's
but
just
it's
not
still
used
not
to
an
it.
it's
But
still not an
he's not
excuse.
there. He's absent.
Yeah, he is, but it's still not an excuse.
Right.
Work is not an excuse to be absent with your family.
Hmm.
It's just a necessary reason to be absent. But when you come home, you need to be a part of your kids' lives. You need to be a support system for your wife. You need to, be actively involved in the discipline teaching and instructing of your kids, as you started off talking about.
Hmm.
Or
For
else
sure.
or else your worth as a father becomes what you make monetarily.
Yeah.
And I think that for fathers, and when you talk about God's design for the family and how important the family is, as we started the podcast off talking about, you said that this movie has a lot to do with family. The Bible talks a lot about family, Christian household, different things like that.
Hmm.
God wanted and God created a father to be more than just dollar bills that come into the home.
Hmm.
So that's a great point that I think that is worth putting out there,
Yeah.
because he's definitely failing on the father level. He's a paycheck. That's it.
Yeah.
Is what the movie depicts.
Yeah. Sure.
So
I mean, yeah. And when he's worried when they see that Kevin is missing, and I don't recall a scene but he's not the one.
leading the charge.
Yeah, he's not, like,
Yeah.
ignoring it at all, but he's not doing everything he can, right? And maybe it's because he's in the background, maybe he's just caring for everyone else, and maybe that's what's happening, but, based on the way that things happen earlier in the movie, it just doesn't seem like that's the guy he is.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because it's the exact opposite of what God does for us.
Mhm.
It's there was a rift due to the fall, and then God, as and I'm not saying that God's a man or a woman or anything like that. I'm just saying that he actively pursues the redemptive uh path for us as humans.
Mhm.
Actively pursues it. And in this movie, you don't actually see the figurehead, the father of, the figurehead of the family, actively pursuing the safety of his son.
Right.
So it's just
Not even
interesting.
and not just when his son is home alone and they've left him and flying. Wow. They've flown. I told you I'm dragging. I told you I'm dragging. They've flown over the Atlantic Ocean. They're to
Right,
Europe
right.
or wherever they're going, France. And not even only that, but before they ever left, when his own brother called his son a jerk, does nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think, and this may be controversial, but that's probably pretty normal for most families.
Could be. Yeah.
So that would be the charge, that if you're a dad out there listening, and the Bible calls you to a higher standard. The Bible calls you to lead your family, teach, instruct your family, and protect your kids, even if it's against your brothers, your parents, whoever. You are their safety. Um,
Right.
so I would just I would encourage you to fully step into that authority, into that role in your family, for the betterment of it. It's help lead your wife, be there for her too, and kind of like what Nick was talking about earlier is if there's a chaos going on, be the one to organize it in a way that you can attack it and be triumphant as a family. So,
For sure.
all right, what else do we got, Nick?
Excuse me. So a little bit later in the movie, just before man, what are their Marvin? What's Joe Pesci's character's name?
Marv
Marvin.
and oh man, we always forget names. We got to do
I
a better
know.
job at remembering names.
I would have known if I didn't. Oh well, it doesn't matter. The
It
two
doesn't matter.
robbers, the two
Two
thieves.
robbers. Yeah, like
Yeah, the wet bandits
yeah,
as they want to as
yeah, because
Marv wants to be called.
they're flooding all the homes.
Yeah.
It's it is a funny movie, I will say. The
Yeah,
comedy is
it's
really good and it's clean,
yeah.
so you can enjoy it. Yeah.
Mine is clean minus when Kevin's going through Buzz's
Oh,
stuff
right. Yeah,
and there's a
absolutely.
Playboy magazine.
And I
And
wonder if
you don't
that's where
see
the
anything,
ratings come
but
from.
you
Actually,
see
now
the
that we think
cover.
about it, now that we think about it, I wonder if that's where the ratings come from.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe the whatever. But anyway, the two robbers.
Yeah, so before they're coming to the house, so this is before all of like the pranks and stunts and all of that stuff. When all the things that would have killed each one of them would have killed any normal human being, but somehow these thieves are making it through every single one. Paint cans to the face, falling down the steps, fire on the head, um, falling from the zip line as they're trying to get over to the house, stepping on the nail in the basement, all of those things. Any one of those things, could have. I mean, the nail wouldn't have killed anybody, but um, the paint cans for sure would have broken their skulls and done some damage. And they seem to be fine. So right before they get into that part of the movie, Kevin's sitting in the church, and there's like the kids are on stage doing like, I don't know if it's a rehearsal or if it's the actual play
Mm-hmm.
or performance, but they're singing songs, and he sits the old man that Kevin thinks is a serial killer
Right.
basically comes and sits right next to him,
Mm-hmm.
and then they start to talk, right? How would you and do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Keep talking about it to help me remember.
Okay, so it's in the church. They sit down. The old man starts to talk about his family
Mm-hmm.
and how he's separated from his son and hasn't talked to his son, and he's actually here in the church because his granddaughter is on stage and he never gets to see her. So he came in and he sat down in the pew, and then Kevin ends up giving an advice. You should just call your son. You should just call him. It's the holidays. People love that, and I'm sure your granddaughter would love the presents, right? That you have that. Um, and so where I'm going with that is so many Christians neglect the value and importance of encouragement from other Christians.
Mm.
So many Christians, and one way that really shows itself is neglecting to gather with the body of believers on Sunday for church services.
Wow, that's interesting.
And
Yeah.
so Hebrews 10:25, actually I'll start in 24. Um Actually I'll start in 23. There's a lot of good stuff here, but
It's
let us
actually
hold
really.
fast. Do
Sorry. Go
what?
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll talk after, but go ahead.
Okay. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So, the writer of Hebrews is encouraging, exhorting Christians to not abandon gathering together. He's saying, here are some people, here are some Christians who think they can do it alone. They think they can just be by themselves. One of the memes that I see often is, I think, worship is for church, but worship is for 3 a.m. car rides and things like that. And sure, that's true, but there's something special and unique about gathering with other believers in church. When you come together at church, in the Bible, it's talking about the assembly, the gathering of believers to worship together and encourage one another. That's exactly what church is. And so we'll say things like, that a lot of, for a long time, travel baseball games happen on Sundays. And we'll say things like, in an effort to justify ourselves, we'll say things like, well, I can worship God on the baseball field, or I can minister to the people around me while I skip church to go to this travel game on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do all that. And I can miss 6 weeks of Sundays in a row because that's the baseball season, and I'll just minister while I'm there. So, on one hand, okay, if that's true, which it's partially true, but if that's true, are you doing that?
Right. I mean, that's a good
Are you
question. Yeah.
are you there actually ministering, sharing the gospel with the people that are there, with the unbelievers who are there on your kids' travel baseball team or whatever sport it is? It could be anything,
Right.
or it could be any event. Are you actually doing that? So that's one aspect of that. Are you? So you say this is your justification. Are you actually following through and doing that? But again, yeah, you worship God when you're on the baseball field. You worship God when you're watching and cheering on your kid when they're doing something they love. That is an act of worship, but it's not church. It's not the gathering of believers together to as one body to lift praises to God and encourage one another and pray for one another and help each other in their daily lives. That's what church is supposed to be about. And
Mm-hmm.
and the writer of Hebrews is saying some people neglect this. Some people are okay without this. They think they're okay without it. Don't abandon it because it's
Right.
valuable and it's important. And I think that scene with Kevin and the older gentleman um, is is an example of why this is so important. Because here's an old man speaking to a younger man or younger kid. I mean, and obviously the movie doesn't say that they're Christians or anything like that, but they're sitting in a church building, right? They're sitting in a church, encouraging one another through the problems that they're experiencing in their life and giving advice and counsel on how to resolve these issues that they see before them, that they're encountering and experiencing in their everyday life. And that's exactly what church is supposed to be. We
Right.
should gather together to sing, we should gather together to learn, and we should gather together to pray for one another. We should gather together to counsel one another through issues.
I would
And
say I think we need to, so knowing where we are in today's time and um let's see, organizing here. So with the past 2 or 3 years with COVID, I think we have to
Mhm.
even be more specific in our language when we talk about this because right now we're seeing Zooms, where you just you stay at home and you get on Zoom or Skype or whatever, FaceTime, and you do a Bible study, um, and then you write that off as well, back in the Bible days they did house church.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, but they were still together in the same location.
Mhm.
This is not through. It wasn't through electronics. And I think it's actually, I was laughing as you kind of were talking there in my own head, and what I was going to say earlier was that it's funny that you brought that up because these aren't planned. I didn't know that you were going to say that, but today at church we talked about that.
Mhm.
um Me and my buddy Adam, shout out to Adam Sorgi, we were talking about with COVID, people are just scared to jump back in, and they have been for a while. And I think for the majority of people, it's been back to normal for a little while. But there are still people that are writing things off that I don't have to be at church anymore. I can just either sit at home and watch it on TV, like watch it on my TV, log in and see the eCampus, and all of those things are great. Technology is there to make us convenient, but one of the things that I brought up in that conversation with Adam was, I heard a quote from somebody, and I'm not going to remember who it was for, but to give them credit for it, but they said that an online church gathering is like a marriage where one of the spouses never comes home. you're missing all of the love, you're missing all of the community, you're missing everything that is actually in the same room, the either the physical touch with hugging or being in each other's presence, whatever that is. And it's just one extra barrier, and
Mhm.
it seems to be a slippery slope to me. To keep justifying things in that manner. So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's good.
so pretty
So
much go back to church if you're still worried about being sick and all of this. I'm sure that churches, even if you go back and you're still skeptical and you want to wear a mask or something, go back. Just get back involved with other believers, because nobody's really being affected by it anymore.
yeah,
It's pretty much over.
yeah,
We need to get out of this fear mentality of we're going to lose our lives, because even if we, I'm not saying be stupid with your life, obviously, but with everything that's come out about COVID and illnesses like that I don't know, just what we've been dealing with, it's ridiculous to not actually get back into church.
yeah. I don't actually think, and I might be wrong, and I might just be pessimistic, but I don't think fear is the primary thing.
You think it's convenience?
I think it's comfort and it's convenience and it's a lack of value placed on what church is. And some of that, not all of it, but some of that is because of the way that we do church in America, right? Some of that is a direct result of how church functions. And other parts of that are a direct result of people um, not valuing what church is supposed to be in a biblical manner at all. Um,
Well, here, let
so,
me stop you there. Let's unpack that a little bit.
okay.
From your experience, how do you see the Western church functioning?
Well, in a lot of ways, it functions like an event, like an organization structuring an event rather than structuring a family gathering.
So what would
So,
you so break that down for me further?
so if we look at Scripture,
Hmm.
church looks more like a Thanksgiving dinner among family members than it does a organization hosting a massive concert.
So what would be your charge? Would your charge be to push it back into the homes?
No, not necessarily into the homes. It's more an attitude, and it's more a principle than it is, okay, now everyone go back to home church. It's so it comes back down to the fundamental question, what is church? Okay? What is it? You can't mutually encourage each other if you hear from one person all the time. You can't mutually encourage each other if you don't know what other people's struggles are. What happens around a a table? People talk. People talk about what's going on in their life. People are sharing a meal together. They talk about problems, successes, and things like that. That needs to be incorporated somehow into church. And one of the ways that
So
that would be incorporated is people asking for prayer, actually having space to ask people to pray for them. Where they James says, "Come to if you're sick, go to the elders and have them pray for you, because the prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective."
right, and
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that. How do you so what you just explained is pretty much the modern day life group. How do
In a
you
way, yeah.
how so have you experienced churches that don't have that?
Yes, but again, if that's the way, if Sunday is a concert um and life group is church, then Sunday is not a church.
But can it have multiple functions? Can't you it's hard to do both, but can you at least try? And if you do
Sure.
try, I guess your charge would be, err on the side of the Sunday morning Thanksgiving meal kind of thing, right? Was that what you'd
Yeah.
be saying?
Yeah, and so keep in mind, I'm not being literal,
Right, understood.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
I
I'm
don't
not
want to I
saying
don't want to
gather around a
yeah,
table.
right.
I'm
But
saying the
you're saying the
purpose.
essence of it. Yeah, the essence.
Right. The whole point of the church. Okay. What makes you? what brings you into the church? It is that you have been adopted into the family of God.
Well, not always, but majority of the time that the like. So you mean like the church, as in you're born again at that point?
Yes, I think
Like
there's no
you're a
distinction. I think there's no distinction between the church gathering and church. There's no distinction between capital C church and who it's for, meaning all believers,
right,
and the gathering that happens on a Sunday morning. There's no distinction there. They aren't
right,
for different people.
right. So when you originally said go into church, all are welcome to go literally into a church.
Right.
But
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 who is it
but
for?
but who's it for
Yes.
is the question that we're kind of
Right.
unpacking here, right?
Right.
And I think that you have to look at, I don't know, you got to look at that two different ways, or at least there's two different ways to look at that. The church exists for believers, but it also exists to go out and preach the word for others.
Yes.
So is it a semantics argument of who the church is for? Because it's really for everyone, right? In that sense.
So yes. But what so if we were to go into the Bible, what would so let's say an unbeliever walks into a church, right? Depending on what church is going to be very different
And we're
depending on where
talking
they
a
are,
Sunday
right?
morning.
On a Sunday morning, yeah.
There should be a
At their
distinction.
actual service, right? They
Yes,
walk into the church,
Yep.
the service starts.
Okay.
What should they hear?
They should be hearing. I mean, some of the things that you've said, they should be hearing. Well, one, they should be hearing a sermon that talks about it's like education for like the equipping of the saints, like it says in the Bible, and then um they should be hearing prayer. I mean, just things that I think happen like normally in a
Yeah.
church service. For I guess as a general statement, but I also think that there should be certain distinctions between believer and non-believer in that service.
Yeah.
Until non-believer becomes a believer.
Sure. Exactly.
So I think
Yeah.
that there's nuances there. Now, I think that's where a lot of disagreement happens on where some of those nuances are and others aren't.
So, so I'll use an example from the church that I attend, and I'm one of the pastors at. So we actually do communion every week,
I
right?
don't think non-believers should take communion.
Exactly. So when we do communion, what we say is we stand up there from the front. We describe what communion is every time. We do it every week, but we describe it every week as well. And we describe the purpose, what is it for, and who should be participating right now. And we say, if you are not in Christ, you have not submitted and given your life to Christ, this is not for you.
Right. I
And
agree.
we say
I
that,
agree with that practice.
and we say that directly, because that's what the Bible says. So that
Right.
there right there is one element of that distinction. So,
But that's not to say, and I just want to be clear for those that may be listening. What we're not saying is it's an exclusionary club. It's just
right.
there's a difference because you're the it doesn't make sense for a non-believer to take communion because they don't believe in what communion stands for.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's a very sacred and holy thing to us who actually believe. So it's not that you're not doing something that prevents you from this club. It's that it just doesn't make sense that you don't hold it to the level of value that it should be, so therefore you shouldn't take it. The moment that you are convinced that Jesus is who he says he is, you put your faith in him, and you become born again, you become a Christian, then you're in the club, man. Like, we'll celebrate, you can take communion, you can do all this stuff. It's not it's hard to communicate the difference in keeping someone out for tradition's sake and then for what would that be? Values sake, maybe? How would you describe
Well,
that?
I think it's. I'm not 100% sure what the kind of thing that you're trying to get get to, but you know, if you're actively attending a church and don't believe what is being taught or spoken of at that church, you're an unbeliever, then you should just naturally expect that you're not going to be fully integrated into everything that that church is doing,
Yes, that's true.
right? I mean, that
Mhm. 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 Yeah, that's I do think people have a hard time with that. I do because I think that you defined that really well between I thought that was
that should
really
be a
good.
logical
Welcomed
expectation
and
on your part.
belonging.
If you're an unbeliever,
Because I
regular, you
think a
should.
lot of
Here's
times
some things you should
people
expect.
the
You should
reason why they have a
expect to
hard
be
time with that
welcomed,
is because
right? You should expect
welcomed
to
means you
be
belong
loved.
here.
You should expect to be that people will come up and talk to you
Yeah.
and engage with you and ask you how you're doing. And
Do
you
you
should
have off the
expect to
top
be
of your head
invited
where?
to family homes for dinners and things like that. And you should be able to. You should expect all of that. But you should also expect to be told that you're a sinner who needs to repent from your sins and come to Christ.
Right, he
And
is.
that
Yeah.
until that
Yeah.
takes place, you actually don't belong. You are welcome, but you don't fully
Mhm.
belong. Because the dividing line that takes somebody from welcome to belonging is Jesus. Because if you don't belong to the family of God, you don't belong to the church. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people will conflate those 2
Mhm.
things, but the Bible speaks of those things differently, right? It talks about, welcoming the stranger. And I don't have an exact verse, but talks about welcoming the stranger. And even here in Hebrews, what we just read, who's he talking? He's talking to Christians, right? So he's every time you see the church and the purpose of the church given throughout scripture, it's speaking directly to Christians, right? So when he says don't neglect gathering together, um, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more so to continue encouraging one another through gathering together, that message is given specifically to Christians. And what he's talking about is the
Right.
gathering that happens on
Yeah, it's
Sunday. He's
it's
not
being
Yes, we're supposed to have community with
it's
one
very
another
similar to
beyond
the
that.
feeling you get
But what
when you
he's
go
talking about
to
is that gathering. It's
um
for me, it's community
yeah, I
churches
guess
gathering.
it's very similar
Um,
to
for
let's
for the
say
for if he was right, let's say he was writing that to the church in
you're
Ephesus
dating a
in the
girl,
first
you get
century, it would
married
be
to that
talking about
girl, and she's
those
got
believers
two
gathering
brothers
together.
and a
And
dad,
yes,
and
there if
now you're the new
in
son-in-law,
in Ephesus,
and you
let's say
go over
somebody
and you go
was in the
hang out,
temple of
and
Artemis
the
and
two
just bought a
brothers and dad
prostitute and they're an
are,
unbeliever, and then they walk
like
in
you're
to
a
the
part of the
gathering of
family,
believers in
or
Ephesus.
you're about
They
to be
should
a
be
part of the
welcomed in
family.
and
Like let's say
saying,
you're engaged
yes,
to that
sure, you can
person,
come here, you can sit right here,
but you're
you're
still not
welcome here.
family.
But all
You
the
know what I'm
while
saying?
being welcomed,
You
they should be met
it's like
with
two brothers and
also an
dad, or who
understanding,
whatever
and
the
it should be
mix is.
communicated, not
It's
directly to them in a judgmental way by any
they
means, but it
have
should be
something that you don't
understood
have yet
that,
until
you know
the
what?
wedding. So
I can
that's a
sense that
I
I'm
guess a
welcome,
similarity of that.
and I enjoy it. I like these
Yeah, you can
people. They're
feel that.
nice
You
to
can
me.
feel when
It
you're
seems like they
welcomed,
actually
but
genuinely love
it's
me.
this is still
But I
not your
also know
house.
that
This is
they
still
have
not your
something that I don't.
family. So what? Yeah, you just kind of are there, and right. I don't get it, but so why do you think in modern days um that's so hard for people to practice, I guess, because I think it's easy for people to understand, and when you dive into it and you explain it and you're open to things, and understanding is one thing, but then when you go into practice, it's people don't like to do it. Why do you think that is? Do you have like a is it just because we want people to like us? Is it that we don't actually
Right.
value fully,
There is a distinction.
um or what's a better way to say that? Is it that we don't maybe understand, or we've been desensitized to what God what's a
Hmm.
big deal to God and how He designed
And
the
you
church
can
and how it
feel
should
that,
be
right?
run, but
And
we've been desensitized to that, and it's not that big of a deal anymore. Do you have any thoughts on
right.
that?
And they have traditions and things that you just have
I mean,
no
I know
idea
it's a
about,
hard one, and I'm putting
right?
you on the spot. So
Ways of communicating with each other. You're just like, I don't know any of this. Yeah, that's a good example. And that's yeah, I mean that's the question. That's the question, and it's probably a combination of all the things that you just said. Like probably some more in proportion to others, but I think it's a combination. And maybe something that it comes back to is struggling to understand the difference
I've heard
between the
more
all
effective.
inclusive
I've
inclusive
heard
love
that
that we're to
that
show
phrase
to
where it's
everyone,
where
and
it's where they say like, well, that's one way to
distinguishing
do it, but
between
this is
that
more
and
effective.
the exclusive love that we're to show to other believers.
Right.
So, like, one example that I
But
can
you're
think
just
of,
arguing place and
so I guess,
time.
before I get into the longer version of my answer, I guess the shorter part of the answer could just be that
That's
in
all
some
right. We
ways
got time.
we lack a solid biblical foundation
Yeah.
for what church is, and we think it can just be anything and everything that we think will reach out to other people, like that will be successful
Okay. Right. Yep.
in evangelizing, and we don't, and we look at those things rather than just truly a biblical
Mhm.
foundation of what church is, and we edit it and change it because we think maybe, oh well, this version of the church was good for a time, but it's not good for now. We need to change the way we do it, and
So you're saying that
um
that's the correct place
I
and
don't think
time
people have like
for
bad
evangelism.
motives in
A
doing
Sunday
that. I just
morning is
think
not
it's
for
a
that.
misconception of we can do it better, or our culture needs us to do it differently. Like I think that could be, yeah, maybe more effective. Yeah, and I think it's
Right. And I think it doesn't Paul
right, and I think it comes from a
right.
genuine desire to reach people. Right, I think that's probably the true. Right, yeah. So like,
Right. Yeah.
um, my answer is going to end up being a lot longer than I thought it was, but yeah. So take for example Billy Graham. Billy Graham was not a he might have been a licensed or ordained pastor in some form, but
Do
Billy Graham
you
was not the
cuz
pastor of
yeah,
the
yeah.
church, right? And Billy Graham hosted hundreds of events worldwide and preached. There was music, there was preaching, and there was a gathering of tons of people, and not a single event was church. Yeah. So right. Or no, I think evangelism is definitely there, right? Because you might have unbelievers who come in, and anytime you're preaching the gospel, there's an evangelistic aspect to it. And then there's also people who think
Yep.
or are claiming
Yeah.
to be believers who aren't. So there should always
And you're
be
saying
an
that,
evangelistic aspect to your Sunday
yeah,
morning
and
service,
you're just
because
saying time and
how does
place.
a
Yeah.
Christian become
Yeah.
equipped?
Because
It's
even in
through a
it doesn't
better
Paul write,
understanding
and
of the
I'm
Bible,
I don't know
better
where this
understanding of
is.
the gospel and how that's communicated
Um
to people. And in
but doesn't he
communicating
write
that,
some,
in
maybe it is
teaching
in
that,
I don't know,
you're
Hebrews maybe,
presenting the
where he
gospel, which is the power of God to
where
save, right? Paul says in Romans
in
1, "For I am
church
not ashamed of the
it's
gospel, for
for
it's the power of
believers,
God to
but you need to be
salvation," right?
aware that there
So in
might be
preaching the
unbelievers
gospel,
in your
you're
midst.
going to have people come
Does
to
that ring a
faith.
bell?
And so there's an
I know that
evangelistic
somewhere.
aspect to that in church. But to be all about outreach, that's what Billy Graham was doing, right? That's what he was doing, traveling around the nation, but he was not the pastor of a church. This was not Billy Graham's
Yeah.
traveling church service. This was
I don't
Billy Graham
yeah.
Evangelistic Association
I
doing
don't think that's what I'm
outreaches in
talking
all
about,
these
but
places,
I know what
but
you're
it looked a
talking
lot like
about.
a church service.
Yeah, I
Fine.
remember
It
that,
wasn't
but
one
I don't think it was in
because it
that
wasn't the
cluster
gathering of
versus
God's
talking about spiritual
people
gifts. But
on
I'll have
at
to
a
look that up,
specific
and then
time
maybe I'll throw
on
it
a
in
Sunday
the
morning
description so that people
lifting
know what
his
I'm talking about.
praises.
But I remember that somewhere.
Church is different than what Billy Graham was doing.
Maybe I'll look it up
Well,
here.
what Billy Graham was doing was great.
No, I'm just gonna look it up. You can go ahead.
I'm in place. Yep. But then, yeah, um, maybe potentially, I can't think of anything that's worded that way, but you might be talking about one of the letters to the Corinthians where it's talking about spiritual gifts and it's talking about how they need to, if you're speaking in tongues, there needs to be an interpreter because, you sound like a gong, basically. You're just a banging cymbal. And those who, you don't think so? Okay. Yeah. 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 So, yeah. And so to answer, to go ahead. Sorry. Okay. So to come back to your other question, why is it that we might get those things? Why do we not like to put into practice that kind of thing where believers, there is a distinction between
Mhm.
believers and unbelievers, and we basically want to, in a lot of ways, cater to unbelievers. And so what I said was that we have trouble distinguishing between the all-inclusive love that we're called to give in the greatest commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with
Right.
everything you are, and then love your neighbor as yourself. That is inclusive of every person that we ever encounter. Everyone that we ever encounter, we are to love in that manner, and we're to extend that love to everybody. But then there's
Right.
also
Yeah.
an exclusive love that should only be given to other believers. And I think we can get an example of that in First John
Well, I think it comes from
chapter
the innate
3 in verse
wanting, like,
11.
because as a
For this is
Christian,
the message that you
you
have
do
heard
have
from the
something
beginning,
that
that we should
unbelievers
love
don't, and I
one
don't think that there's
another.
a Christian that would actually
And it's
disagree with that.
important
I
to
don't even think
note
that's
the one
controversial to
another
say. I would
because,
just say
again,
that
this is written by the
the
Apostle John, one of Jesus's,
and
original
I feel this all the
disciples.
time. I'm sure most Christians do.
Who is he writing to?
You want
He's
the
writing
unbeliever
to
so
a
badly to have
church.
what you have.
And so
So
when it
maybe
says
there's a motive there for conflating the two,
we
is
should
because we want
love
it
one
so bad
another,
that we'll just give
what's
it
he
to
talking
them.
about? He's talking about
We'll just give it to them
specifically the church and those
because
who are
but there's a
in the
process,
body of
to that
Christ,
that needs
those
to
who are
be
actually
um
belonging to Christ,
carried
those
out.
who gather
They
together
need
to
to come to
worship.
that,
That's
be
the one
convinced
another,
on,
right?
that they're a sinner,
So
that they
there's
need
love
to
that we should
confess,
extend to all
repent,
people, and
believe
that's
in
the
Jesus.
welcoming. That's that's the
And until they do that,
that's
there
the
does need to be a delineation.
that's the welcoming in, but then there's a love that should be exclusive, and that's the belonging. And so I think that distinction is something that sometimes we struggle with because we do kind of conflate welcoming and belonging. And so exactly.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, the John, you know, the guy writing this letter, this First John is so the one writing for this
Okay.
is the message that you've heard from the beginning that we should love one another. The guy writing that was also the same guy banished to an island, meaning like basically an island prison because he was preaching the gospel. The same guy that was persecuted, beaten, and I think John or it
Oh,
might have been
absolutely.
James,
Yeah,
but I think it was
absolutely.
John, was
Yeah.
boiled. Like his skin was boiled alive and he just didn't die and he kept preaching. So they banished him to an island where he couldn't preach anymore. And that's where he wrote the book of Revelation. But um, we've so you listed several things, and one of them was the comfort and convenience
Yeah,
of our
shout out to the
church. And I think
USA.
while the freedom that we have to gather together whenever we feel like it, and the freedom of religion that we currently, you know, have and have had for hundreds of years in our country is generally a good thing. One negative side effect of it is that we don't view gathering together and experiencing the love of fellow believers with the same urgency that John did. And the people that that were in the church with John did, because they're witnessing people being beaten, people being banished, people being boiled. They're seeing all of these things, this persecution that's actually happening. And
No,
in
I'm
that
with you.
moment, don't you
So
think
I'm gonna ask you a few questions here just to
you
push back a little
you
bit, though. Is
feel the
that
need
cool?
for the
And I'm
encouragement
just
of your
doing this to
fellow
play the devil's
believers,
advocate here because
right?
I'm sure listeners may
And
have the
we don't
question, but
have that,
to
right?
some degree,
We
does
don't
the Bible
have that
talk about
urgency,
the
and
apostles
we
having
think
some
that we
degree
can
of
actually do it
unbelief?
alone because we
And if
don't
they were allowed to
experience that
take
type of
communion, why wouldn't an
persecution.
unbeliever be allowed to take
Right?
communion
We
in their
and
unbelief?
that's not bad. Like, not experiencing persecution or actually being free is not a bad thing, but we do have to watch the way that in our natural thoughts and in our flesh that we might actually use that freedom, right? We might actually use it to expand our comfort rather than for the things that God would have us use it for. So I just think it's something we have to be careful about, and we need to see the love of our fellow
Okay,
believers and the encouragement that we get from them as absolutely essential to our
pretty clear on
life,
that. Yep.
because there could come a time where not only is that the case because it's always true, but where we are actually experiencing the types of things that we need that, but we don't have it anymore because we abandoned the church gathering. Does that make sense? Mhm.
Hmm.
Um well, first of all, Paul writes that you shouldn't, even believers shouldn't take communion if they're struggling with specific sins, or if they're struggling with certain
Hmm.
things that
Yep.
are, if there's something that they haven't repented of or turned away from. and talks about how people are even getting sick because they're taking communion in an unworthy manner. So in that regard, the Bible is pretty
Mhm.
clear that um, communion must be taken in a worthy manner. So there should be some barriers in place, and if there's even if you are a believer, if there's something in your life that is a wedge between you and Christ, that is a wedge between your fellowship with Christ, that you should back away
Right.
and for a time, maybe not forever, but for a time, abstain from taking until that is resolved and that issue has come and gone. So I would say that yeah, even believers, even for believers, there's times where they shouldn't take communion. But the difference is
Oh, an unbeliever. I
a
got you. I'm with you.
believer
I'm with you.
has
Yep. I'm with you.
been
I'm
made
with you.
into a
I'm with
new
you.
creation
Yeah.
by the death of Christ. And communion symbolizes
Well, that's
Jesus's body being
Romans
given
3.
up
Yeah.
for us, being beaten
Well,
and
and
hung on a
chapter I mean, that's
cross,
for the first 3 chapters of
and
Romans, really.
the juice or the wine, whatever your church uses or whatever your position is on that is representative of his blood that he's poured out and spilled, and his blood
Right.
that cleanses us from our sin, right? So on one side of
Right.
that, only take communion in a worthy manner
No,
for
yeah, that's it.
everyone
I think that's a
across the
good answer.
board.
And
But
you
on the other side of that, the Bible
yeah,
says
no, yeah.
that those
You actually
no one in
answered
the
the other questions
flesh
I had
can
too
please
in all of
God,
that. So that's
right?
good. That's good
So
stuff.
automatically from that moment, from that statement,
So where do we go next, Nick?
if you
That's
can't please God,
I
you
don't really
can't
have
take
anything else
communion
for
in an
that.
unworthy
That's all I
manner, or
have.
you can't take it in a worthy manner. Therefore, you shouldn't take it. Does that make sense? So like an unbeliever cannot please God. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think I said that very clearly when I first said it, but an unbeliever is incapable of pleasing God because their sinful nature is still fully intact and they are
Oh,
slave to their sin. Yeah. And so,
um
um,
yeah, that's a
and they
big
still
question
have
off
their
the
old
spot. I
nature,
would just
but a
say,
believer has been given a new
the
nature.
biggest
They're
I
a
mean,
new
and
creation, and God
I've
has
been on a kick
awakened
to
them
say this to a lot
and
of
given
people,
them a
so if
new
they're
life in
listening to this
which
podcast,
now they can
they might
please
tease me
God.
about it later, but the biggest
So
the
then
most
it is
pivotal
possible for a believer to take communion in a worthy manner.
okay, so
So
I went to a
I
Bible
think that's
study
the
at
distinction.
church,
Does
and
that make
we were
sense?
going through. I think it was
No, yeah.
Romans,
No, yeah.
and we were going through Romans, and it was like a brief kind of walk through Romans kind of thing. And one of the things that I never heard before, and if you've heard this, that's great. I haven't, so that's cool. Is reading the word.
That's really
He
all I
said
had.
was
Yeah.
like the person teaching the
Can you think
class,
of
one
any
of our elders
questions
at
that
church
you would
was
think,
is
okay, so let's say
there's like through
so I
sanctification,
mentioned we
it's like an
watched this
inside
as a
out kind of
family movie night.
process.
I
It
didn't
starts in
really
your
do
heart and you
anything,
work your way out,
I
kind of
didn't
like
ask any questions
making a pickle, like
afterwards
the
or anything
pickling
like that to
process.
try
Is
to
you
get
put
the
the thing in the
family
jar, and then
to
it
think of it
turns
through a
from
lens
the
of truth,
inside
but
out
can
to
you think
something
of any
new.
appropriate questions that you might
And I
that
think
somebody
that's
listening to
really
this might
really
ask if they wanted
interesting.
to sit down
So,
and watch this movie with their
or
family
at least I thought it was a good
and to
example.
help
So the
them watch
biggest
it through
thing
the lens of
to
truth?
that's really helped me, and this is going to sound really
I know that I'm
obvious, is
putting you on the
just reading the
spot, but
Bible and making it a priority to read, not just to uh not just to say that you read it or whatever, but read to understand. Because there's a difference between, and in our life group we even went over this. There's a difference between reading it and then those who read it and understand it. That's even written in I can't remember where. I'm gonna blank on the spot here, but I think it's in Luke. No, well, it's near the parables, so maybe Matthew. Um, but I think that reading the Bible is pivotal to always having it on your minds. Always having it in your mind, and being able to see something and being sharp, keep your sword sharp kind of thing, and being able to just be natural to see the world and stories in that way. And the more that you read it, the more that you understand it, and that you can recall different verses and piece things together, because it's a search. When you're reading it, it's not, you don't just read it and can get it. I mean, you got to look at context, and you got to read it, and then you read something in Romans that you find in Ephesians and Thessalonians and all these different places, and then you read something in the Old Testament that is, talked about in the New Testament, and they're referring back, and just how interwoven all of it is. That process is kind of a search. So, and something does change in you when you start to understand it, and having it on ready to go all the time is the surefire way to get better at viewing stories through the lens of truth, and having it ready at the ready to tackle life with is that's just kind of my take. I rambled a little bit, and maybe that was a little disorganized, but that would kind of be my answer. I don't really have a question per se, but my encouragement would be to get into the Word and read the Bible, and read it as often as you can, because your relationship with God will grow as you read it, and it's like working a muscle. If the more you read it and the more you study, the faster and more equipped you'll be to see your faith come out into your life and view things through that lens. So
Yeah.
with you, when you say one, usually it's 5.
Yeah. No, you're good.
You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't take mine. I just said read the Bible, and then you said read the Bible before you watch it. That was mine. All right, you can't. You stole my answer.
Yeah. So I think I got one thing for, and it really could grow into more, but just one thing. Well, maybe it's two. I don't know. You can tell me if this is one or two things. Yeah, maybe that's what's happening. Yeah, maybe that's the case. Um, so now thinking of this, I wish this is something I would have done. So, if you're a parent
Yeah, that's good. I
and
like
you're
that.
gonna sit down and watch Home Alone because it's Christmas time, we watch it,
I
every
like
year
that.
around this
That's
time. So
fun.
maybe
I
you're gonna
like
do
that. That's a
that.
good exercise
So
for sure.
one very
That's
practical
awesome.
thing that you can do
Just be
is
careful asking
read
your wife those questions.
Ephesians 6, 1 through
That
4.
might not be as fun.
So I'm gonna do
That's
what?
unpredictable. No, we love our wives. We love our wives, but we give them a hard time. Cool.
Right. But hey,
Well, I
I'm
hope
being
you guys have
specific.
stuck it out
All right.
this
So
long.
so
I
here
don't
we
think
go.
this is quite our longest
So
episode, but this was
specific.
definitely maybe the deepest one, or the hardest one maybe
Read
to swallow.
first read
Uh, be
verses
encouraged.
1
There
through
should be a
3.
delineation
So,
between believer
children,
and
obey your
unbeliever.
parents in the
But
Lord, for this is
there's a
right.
difference between
Honor
being
your father
welcomed
and mother. This is the first commandment with
and
the promise that it may go
belonging.
well with you,
And I guess that would be the takeaway,
and that you
right,
may
Nick?
live
Would
long
you
in the
add
land.
anything to that?
So you read that. And what's the first
Yeah.
part? Children, obey your parents.
So we
And then
want to
just
thank you
ask.
guys.
Ask
Check
your
us out on
kids,
social media. Check us out
how
on
did Kevin fail?
YouTube for the video podcast. There's a
Okay.
few more graphics.
And
you get
then
to see our faces.
read verse 4.
If this content brings
Fathers,
value to you
do not
wherever you're
provoke your children to
listening
anger,
or
but bring
viewing,
them up in the discipline of the in the
subscribe,
instruction of the Lord.
like, notification
How did Kevin's
bells,
parents fail?
rate the podcast, all those good things. And then don't be afraid to jump into the conversation. If you
And
think we're completely
let
wrong,
the kids be the one to answer.
jump
that.
in the comment section on Facebook. If you have your own opinion of something, we want to hear it. We want to argue
Yeah.
with us. Good discourse is always good. If you
who knows how that goes.
just make sure that you bring your
Unpredictable.
references. That would be a good thing to add in there. I would say that. And then just know that we want you guys to be encouraged, and we appreciate all of the support. So we will see you guys next time. Nick, what's the next movie? Do you remember? I've asked you this. I asked you this like 5 times this week. What's the order? I mean, I'm gonna pick Die Hard because that's just Die Hard.
No, I think that's good.
Really? Was Fences not rated R? We'd have to go back and check, but it'll be Die Hard next week. So check out for that. Nick, do we have time to go live soon? Maybe. Okay, we'll post it on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. Maybe when we go live, I'll throw something up there. So Die Hard next week. Let us know. Watch it before next week. We want to let you guys know
Yeah, tell
beforehand
us.
so that you have time to watch it and you can join the conversations. And
Argue with us.
yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We'll see you next week.
Are we doing Die Hard next? We're either I mean, we can do Home Alone 2 or we can do Die Hard. Home Alone 2 is gonna be basically the same, though. Alright, we'll do Die Hard. That'll actually be our first rated R movie, I think. Yeah. I don't Yeah, I don't remember. Maybe. I don't know.